السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أعزائي طلبة المرحلة الرابعة قسم اللغة الإنجليزية. Today we are going to talk about a very important topic related with the idea of negation. We have talked already about in two lectures about negation and how we can achieve negation and some related issues. Today we are going to talk about what is called the scope of negation and the focus of negation. So starting with the scope of negation, a negative form may be said to govern or determine the occurrence of a non-assertive form only if the later is within the scope of the negation, i.e. within the stretch of language over which the negative meaning operates. So the idea of scope of negation related with on which piece of language we apply negation. So when we have a negative word or a negative morpheme, does this negation related with or affects only the word itself or the whole sentence or part of it? So the extension of that effect is what we call it as the scope of negation. So when we have a negative word or a negative morpheme, this would affect either the whole sentence or part of it. This stretch of language that is affected by the negative word or negative morpheme is what we call it as the scope of negation. The scope of negation normally extends from the negative word itself to the end of the clause or the beginning of a final adjunct. The subject and any adjuncts occur before the predication normally lie outside it. The operator is sometimes within and sometimes outside the scope. So when we have a negative word or negative morpheme, we start the scope of negation from the beginning or from that word or morpheme onward to the end of the clause or the sentence itself sometimes. What about the subject? The subject of that clause usually lies outside the negation or the scope of negation. And the operator sometimes lies within and sometimes outside, as we will see within this lecture. So let's see these two examples in which we talk about the scope of negation. I definitely didn't speak to him. So the negative word not used after the operator and the word definitely, the adverbial, and the subject. So the extension started from not to the end of the clause or the sentence here in this example. So the words that are related or lie within the scope of negation are not speak to him. So this means it is definite that I did not speak to him. It is definite. I'm definite. So the word definitely is affirmative here. It is asserted here. Why it is asserted? Why it is definite? Because it is outside the scope of negation. So it is not negated. While in the second example, I did not definitely speak to him. So the word definitely is included within the scope of negation. Why is that? Why it is included? Simply speaking, because we locate it after the negative word not. So the extension of the scope of negation of the second example is including not definitely speak to him. So it is not definite that I speak to him. When an adverbial is final, however, it may or may not lie outside the scope. So when we have an adverbial, and this adverbial came at the end of the clause or the sentence, sometimes we included within the scope of negation and sometimes no. So how do we know that it is within the scope of negation or it is outside the scope of negation? This is related with the other idea of negation, which is what we call it as the focus. And we will see what do we mean by the focus of negation. So I wasn't listening all the time. So here the scope of negation is limited to the word not and the word listening. So we negated the process of negation. So the process of listening, sorry. So I listened none of the time. I negated the process of listening. While in the second example, we included the adverbial with the scope of negation. I wasn't listening all the time. So all the time here is included. So this means that I listened some of the time, not all the time. If an assertive form is used, it must lie outside the scope. So when we have an assertive form, like some, like other ones which we talked about earlier, they are all used outside the scope of negation, and we know that we can not use them normally with negative sentences or negative clauses. So whenever we use them, this indicates that they are outside the scope of negation, not within the scope of negation. I did not listen to some of the speakers. So we have the assertive form some. So we said that it is outside the scope of negation. So this sentence means I listened to some and I did not listen to some others. While in the second example, I did not listen to any of the speakers. So I negated, I used the non-assertive form any, so it is included within the scope of negation. So this means I listened to none. I did not listen to anyone. This means that I negated the process of listening. So now we come to the idea of focus, which is highly related with the scope of negation. Let's see what's meant by focus of negation. We need to identify not only the scope, but the focus of negation. So what we mean by focus, it is a special or contrastive nuclear stress. So it is a stress, it is a phonetic, let us say, phenomenon falling on a particular part of the clause. Indicates that the contrast of meaning implicit in the negation is located at that spot. So from its name, this means that the negation is focused on this word, How do we clarify this to the listener? By having a different stress or having a stress on certain word or part of the sentence. Also, that by implication, the rest of the clause can be understood in a positive sense. So, when we have focus of negation, this indicates that we negate this part of the sentence rather than the other parts of it. Let's see these sentences and notice how the focus of negation affects the meaning of the sentence itself. Starting with the first sentence, Harry did not attack the Labour government. Here the focus is on Harry. So this means that Harry is negated. So this sentence means someone attacked the Labour government, but it was not Harry. Why is that? Because we focused in our negation on Harry. So Harry is negated, means someone other than Harry did that. The second sentence, Harry did not attack look here, the focus is on the word attack, the Labor government. So this means he did something to the Labor government, but he didn't attack it. So we negated the action attack. So this means that he did something else to the Labor government other than attacking it. Third example, Harry did not attack the labor. So here the focus is on the word labor. So the labor is negated here. What does this mean? He attacked some government, but it was not the labor one. You see here. So we negated the idea of attacking the labor government, and we mentioned that he attacked some other government other than the labor one. So in this way, the focus highly affects the meaning that we indicate through our sentence through using certain focus of negation. Scope and focus of negation. Scope and focus are interrelated such that the scope must include the focus. Of course, since we have a focus of negation, this means that the scope should include this part because we focused on it in our negative sentence. From this, it follows that one way of signaling the extent of the scope is by the position of the focus. So when we specify the focus, this indicates that we specify the scope of negation for that sentence or that clause. Since the scope of negation is often not otherwise clearly signaled, we can indicate it by where we place the information focus. So if we don't focus on some word within the sentence, so we as listeners might make some assumption about what is negated within the sentence. So it is a matter of having dependency on the listener as well as the speaker, how the speaker deliver his negation or her negation, and how the listener receives or understood that negation. Let's see here. I didn't leave home because I was afraid of my father. So here we specified, here we have the focus is on the word home. So it included within the scope of negation. So here the negation is related with not leave home. So this means I did not leave home. So I stayed at home. So this means that because I was afraid of my father, I did not leave home. So I stayed at home because I am afraid of my father. In the second example, I did not leave home because I was afraid of my father. So here we did not specify the scope, the focus, of negation. So this means that we expected something else, or we made assumption that I left home, but it was not because I was afraid of my father. So here means that I did not stay at home. I left home, but the reason behind that was not being afraid of my father. Negation of modal auxiliaries. So now we start talking about modals, and concerning modals and negation, we have two cases in which we have the auxiliary verb or the operator, which is the modal verb, whether it lies within the scope of negation or it is outside the scope of negation. The scope of the negation may or may not include the meaning of the auxiliary itself. We therefore distinguish between auxiliary negation and main verb negation. So when we have modals, either the modal itself lies within the scope of negation or it is outside the scope of negation. So starting with auxiliary negation, this means that the meaning of the modal verb is included within the negation, within the scope of negation. The auxiliary negation, starting with number 1, may not, if we use it to express permission. You may not go swimming. So here the permission, the meaning of may, is negated. So you are not allowed. You are not allowed to go to for swimming. So number 2, cannot or can't, in all senses. So whenever we have can and the sentence is negative, so the meaning of can is within the scope of negation, so it is negated. First, you can't be serious. Here, if we use can for expressing possibility, so it is not possible that you are serious. Or if we use it for permission, for example, you can't go swimming, you are not allowed to go for swimming. And also when we use it to express ability, she can't ride a bicycle, she is not able to. All these 3 meanings included within what we call it as auxiliary negation. Number 3, need not. Also, it is when we use it, we use it within the scope of negation. You need not pay that fine. You are not obliged. If we express obligation or necessity, it need not always to be my fault. So these are included within the scope of negation. Turn to main verb negation. So here the modal verb is outside the scope of negation. It is outside, so it is positive, it is affirmative. So if we use may for expressing possibility, it is a main verb negation. They may not bother to come if it's wet. So it is possible. So the possibility is affirmative here. We did not negate the meaning of possibility. It is possible that they will not bother to come, etc. Will not or won't in all senses. So whenever we use will with negative form, this means that it is outside the scope of negation. Don't worry, I won't interfere. So this means that I am willing not to interfere. So my will is not to interfere. He won't do what he is told. He insists on not doing. They won't have arrived yet. I predict, if we use it for a predication, that they've not arrived yet. So whenever we use will with negative form, it is usually outside the scope of negation. It is not included with the negation. Number 3, shall, also in all senses. Whenever we use shall, this indicates that it is outside the scope of negation, so it is affirmative also. And here you have examples about a prediction or willingness. And number 4, must, when we express obligation, of course. It is also outside the scope of negation, so it is affirmative. I mean the modal verb itself. You must not keep us all waiting. You will oblige me by not keeping us all waiting. Ought, also, ought not, also lies outside the scope of negation. Thank you very much and see you in the next lecture.